Hey there, history buffs. Before you settle in for a snooze, make sure to like and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss the shocking truths we're about to dive into. Ever wondered how medieval folks got punished for the most ridiculous reasons? Or how ancient civilizations really let their hair down, literally? Stick around, because today we're unearthing bizarre practices, grotesque myths, and some downright shocking disasters that will keep you wide awake. Let's kick things off with a little quiz. What's worse than a bad hair day? How about being roasted alive for your fashion choices? Yes, in ancient Rome, certain outfits could land you in some hot water, literally. And speaking of hot, did you know that in the Middle Ages, the punishment for theft could include having your hand chopped off? What a way to celebrate your birthday! But wait, there's more. Ever heard of the dancing plague of 1518? Picture it, hundreds of people in Strasbourg, France, suddenly breaking into dance until they collapsed from exhaustion. Was it a curse, a mass hysteria, or just a really bad party? You'll have to stick around to find out. We'll also delve into strange sexual curiosities, like the ancient Greeks' obsession with phallic symbols, or the curious case of the belly button tax imposed by the Romans in 5 AD. Yes, you heard that right. So, grab your popcorn, because we're about to unveil a treasure trove of bizarre facts, complete with specific dates that'll make your head spin. And if you need something to lull you to sleep later, just hit that loop button so this episode can repeat until you drift off, assuming you can manage to sleep after everything you're about to learn. Buckle up, history has never been so wild. In the quaint and sometimes absurd world of medieval Europe, where knights jousted for glory, peasants toiled in fields, and the air was perpetually scented with the aroma of stale bread and the occasional barnyard creature, there existed a curious institution, the Guild Butter Quality Inspection Rituals. Yes, you heard that right. While you might think that butter was just butter, these medieval artisans took their dairy products as seriously as a knight took his armor, and often with equally ludicrous results. Let us start our journey in the year 1150, in the bustling town of Bruges, Belgium, a place where merchants thrived and butter flowed like the Seine River. It was here that the first recorded butter guild, the Fraternity of the Golden Churn, established a set of standards that would baffle and bemuse for centuries. Imagine a room filled with men wearing woolen tunics, faces solemn as they prepared to judge the cream of the crop. But what made these butter inspectors experts, you ask? Why, their rigorous training, of course. The training of the butter judges asterisk. 1. Smell sensitivity asterisk. Each judge was required to possess an olfactory prowess that could detect the faintest hint of rancidity. It is said that one judge, Pierre, the sniffer, Dubois, could identify butter that had gone bad simply by being within a 20-foot radius. Talk about a gift and a curse. 2. Texture testing asterisk. Judges would often carry small wooden paddles to conduct the squish test. If the butter didn't yield gently to their touch, it was deemed unworthy. Picture a room full of burly men gingerly poking at butter. Can you imagine the conversations? Ah, yes, this butter is soft, but does it have the right amount of smoothness? A critical question, Indeed. 3. Color comparison *. The inspectors had a color chart, ranging from the purest alabaster to a more dubious shade they affectionately dubbed sickly yellow. This led to some heated debates over whether the butter was sun-kissed or merely moonlit. Fast forward to 1274, to the City of London, where the Guild of Buttermakers was officially chartered. Here, the butter inspection evolved into a full-blown spectacle. Once a month, on a Tuesday, because why not, merchants would gather in the town square, each accompanied by their finest butter. This was not merely a contest, it was a grand event akin to a medieval butter Olympics. The Butter Olympics *. The great churn-off * competitors would churn butter in public, often using ancient, creaky devices that looked more like torture instruments than kitchen tools. The goal? To see who could churn the fastest while reciting the Ode to Dairy. Spoiler alert, it never rhymed. The butter toss *. Yes, you read that correctly. A contest was held where competitors tossed butter at a target shaped like a cow. The winner received a crown made entirely of, what else, butter. The creamy debate * following the games, the judges would engage in a heated discussion about the merits of each contestant's butter, often leading to fisticuffs and the occasional butter-smeared face-off. Who knew that dairy could ignite such passion? Now, you might wonder, what were some of the more eccentric practices that emerged from these events? Every guild had its quirks, and the Butter Guild was no exception. For instance, in 1337, in the idyllic town of Ghent, a group of butter inspectors decided that the quality of the butter was too closely tied to the emotional state of the churners. So, they instituted the joyous churning requirement. The joyous churning requirement *. Churners had to sing while they worked. If their butter was deemed subpar, the blame fell squarely on their lack of glee. Imagine trying to churn butter while belting out a medieval ballad about lost love. Now that's multitasking. They also had to wear churning hats adorned with feathers, bells, and other distractions, which were said to inspire good vibes. However, these hats often led to more butter spills than successful batches. Who knew that fashion could be so slippery? By 1400, the guilds had become so entrenched in their customs that scandal was inevitable. In 1412, a notorious incident known as the Butter Scandal of Nuremberg rocked the very foundations of butter quality. A rival guild accused the Royal Butter Guild of using inferior cow feed, resulting in a butter product that was, horror of horrors, too yellow. The scandalous accusations *. The accusers claimed the Royal Guild was using cow candy, a mix of molasses and corn that supposedly made the butter shinier and more appealing. The ensuing court case featured testimony from cows that were, allegedly, in on the scheme. Yes, that's right, cows were called to testify about their diets. The trial devolved into chaos, with judges overwhelmed by the absurdity of it all. Picture a courtroom packed with butter enthusiasts arguing over the ethics of cow snacks. In the end, the Royal Guild was acquitted, but the incident sparked a nationwide debate about butter transparency that would echo through the ages. And what about the penalties for subpar butter? Oh, dear reader, the punishments were delightfully medieval. In 1453, in the market square of Paris, a butter maker named Jacques Lafleur faced the wrath of the guild after being found guilty of butter fraud, a term that could easily refer to many modern-day grocery store practices. Punishments for butter fraud *. 1. The shameful churn *. Jacques was forced to publicly churn a vat of his own butter while wearing a sign that read, "I made bad butter." The crowd gathered not to support him, but to jeer and throw stale bread. Talk about a buttering up gone wrong. 2. The butter stocks *. He was then placed in stocks for 3 days, during which he had to endure the humiliation of being pelted with the very butter he had misrepresented. Some say it was a delicious irony, while others simply enjoyed the spectacle. 3. Penal butter tax *. To add insult to injury, he was required to pay a penal butter tax to fund the guild's next grand event, a butter ball, of course. The sheer absurdity of the situation begs the question, how far ought one go for a dollop of dairy cred? As we meander through the annals of butter history, we find ourselves in the late 15th century, where the Age of Enlightenment began to stir the pot, quite literally. The guilds, faced with rising skepticism about their methods, decided to modernize. Enter the Scientific Butter Inspection of 1485, spearheaded by none other than Sir Reginald Butterworth, a man whose name was as ostentatious as his love for dairy. The Scientific Revolution in Butter *. Chemical analysis *. Sir Reginald introduced the revolutionary idea of analyzing butter's chemical composition. Who knew that butter could be so complex? He developed the butterometer, an early contraption that measured butter fat content, leading to the realization that not all butter was created equal. Dairy schooling * Guild inspectors were sent to science fairs to learn about emulsification and the pH of milk. Can you picture a butter inspector in a lab coat, arguing with a chemist over the merits of a good churn? Butter symposiums * They began hosting symposiums to discuss butter quality, complete with guest speakers who specialized in dairy physics. You thought your last Zoom call was dull? Imagine a room full of butter enthusiasts discussing the molecular structure of butyrate. But alas, dear reader, the momentum of the butter guilds began to wane as the Industrial Revolution approached. By the 17th century, the artisanal methods that had once brought communities together were being overshadowed by mass production. The once grand butter guilds found themselves at a crossroads, grappling with the question, how to maintain quality in a world increasingly obsessed with quantity. As the 18th century dawned, the guilds adapted, transforming their rituals into more streamlined processes, and many faded into obscurity. But the legacy of their ludicrous yet endearing practices lives on in the hearts, and stomachs, of butter lovers everywhere. So, the next time you spread a generous pat of butter on your toast, remember the bizarre history that led to that moment. From competitive churning to dubious accusations and theatrical punishments, who knew that the humble butter had such a rich story? Perhaps next time, when you're enjoying your breakfast, you might just hear faint echoes of medieval inspectors arguing over the merits of sun-kissed versus moonlit butter in the background. And what's that? You thought butter was simply a condiment? Ah, my friend, it is so much more, an epic saga of dairy devotion, community pride, and the occasional absurdity that would make even the most serious historian chuckle. ##### The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. In the shadowy recesses of medieval marketplaces, where the air was thick with the scents of livestock, spices, and the occasional unfortunate flatulence of a peasant, the butter guilds were quietly bustling. From the 12th to the 15th centuries, these guilds not only produced the golden spread that graced the tables of nobles and commoners alike but also established intricate rituals for ensuring the quality of their buttery wares, a process fraught with construction, bureaucracy, and surprisingly elaborate job descriptions. ####### Construction methods and materials. The primary structure for butter inspection was the butter hall, a modest yet robust building constructed from locally sourced timber and stone. The walls were typically made of oak, renowned for its sturdiness and resistance to rot. Roofs were thatched with straw, the common choice in rural areas, while more affluent guilds opted for wooden shingles. The cost of constructing a butter hall varied but typically ranged from £10 to £50 depending on the region and the materials chosen. For instance, in 1368, the Londinium Butter Guild spent £35 on a new hall that included a fine oak door and a leaded glass window, a luxury at the time. In comparison, a smaller guild in the countryside might manage a simple construction for as little as £15, just enough to make sure the butter didn't melt before inspection. ##### Bureaucratic rules and punishments. The butter guilds were governed by a labyrinthine set of regulations. The laws of butter quality, codified in 1297, outlined the exact standards for butter consistency, color, and smell. A few notable rules included: 1. Texture inspection. Butter should be firm yet pliable, akin to a well-fitted glove. 2. Color standards. Only the richest, sun-kissed yellow was acceptable. A butter too pale? Into the stocks you go. 3. Odor test. The butter had to possess a pleasantly pungent aroma, which was more subjective than it sounds. Imagine a room full of people trying to agree on the smell of something that's essentially spoiled cream. Punishments for failing these inspections were harsh and often public. A bad batch could lead to fines ranging from 2 to 10 shillings, while repeat offenders faced the ultimate punishment, public buttering, where the guilty party would be smeared with rancid butter and paraded through the village. This was both a deterrent and a source of entertainment for the locals, a win-win for the community. #### Roles and job descriptions. Within the Butter Guild, roles were clearly defined, each person contributing to the greater good of butter quality. Here's a brief breakdown of the key positions, their job descriptions, and a few responsibilities. 1. The Butter Master, head honcho, responsible for overseeing all operations, from production to inspection. This was a role that required both culinary expertise and an iron fist. The butter master was expected to have at least 15 years of experience in butter making and an impressive beard, because, obviously, a good beard indicates wisdom. 2. The quality inspectors, the butter barons, These individuals were tasked with the rigorous evaluation of each butter batch. Trained in the art of texture, color, and odor assessment, inspectors followed a strict protocol that included the infamous butter squeeze test. Inspectors were often heard saying, "If it doesn't spread, it's not worth the bread." 3. The butter apprentice, the rookie. Every guild needed fresh blood, and apprentices were often young men aged 12 to 16. Their duties included fetching water, stirring churns, and polishing the butter master's esteemed collection of butter molds. The apprentices were also responsible for record keeping, which often led to them being referred to as the butter scribes, a title they wore with pride until they were inevitably promoted to butter inspectors. 4. The butter scribes, the paper pushers, tasked with maintaining meticulous records of each batch's quality. The scribes ensured that no butter was sold without proper documentation. "The pen is mightier than the churn" was their unofficial motto. Hashtag technical specs and inventories. The technical specifications for butter quality were as detailed as any medieval manuscript. Every guild maintained an inventory of tools and equipment necessary for their operations. Churns, made of oak or elm, typically holding 20 to 50 gallons of cream. Each churn had a paddle, often intricately carved, which played a crucial role in achieving the right butter consistency. Scales, precision was key. The scales used for weighing butter ranged from simple balance scales to more complex models that could measure up to 100 pounds. The accuracy of these scales was so essential that any discrepancies could lead to severe consequences, like being forced to wear a sign that read, "I'm a butter liar." Molds and stampers, used for shaping butter into decorative forms. Molds often bore the insignia of the guild, ensuring that no butter left the hall unmarked. A well-crafted mold could cost around 2 shillings, a small price for the pride of a guild. Storage vessels, wooden barrels and ceramic jars were common for storing butter, particularly for those batches intended for long-distance shipping. These vessels were often treated with beeswax to prevent spoilage, an early form of butter preservation. Hashtag the rituals of inspection. The inspection rituals themselves were elaborate affairs, often involving the entire guild. These ceremonies took place on designated days, typically the first Monday of each month, and had a strict format. 1. Opening ceremony. The butter master would open the proceedings with a speech emphasizing the importance of quality and tradition. "May your butter be as golden as the sun and as smooth as a bard's tale," he would declare. 2. The presentation. Each producer would present their butter, eagerly awaiting the inspector's judgments. Producers would often dress their best, believing that a well-dressed butter maker led to higher quality butter. 3. Quality assessment. Inspectors would engage in a series of tests, squeezing, smelling, and tasting, while the crowd watched in rapt attention. The tension was palpable as the inspectors deliberated. 4. Final verdict. The results were announced, often with much fanfare. Approved butter would be marked with the guild seal, while rejected batches were whisked away to the butter pit, a designated area where bad butter was kept until it could be reprocessed or discarded. 5. Conclusion and revelry. after the inspections, the guild would often host a feast featuring various butter-based dishes, culminating in singing and dancing. When in doubt, butter it out, would be the evening's toast, a phrase that became a staple of guild gatherings. Conclusion. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, the butter guilds and their quality inspection rituals stand out as a testament to the importance of craftsmanship and community. The construction of their halls, the intricate bureaucratic rules, the defined roles, and the technical specifications all contributed to a culture that revered quality and tradition. While one might think that butter inspections were merely a mundane aspect of medieval life, they actually showcased the elaborate social structures and the lengths to which people would go to ensure that their buttery offerings were nothing short of divine. After all, in a world where a good butter could elevate a simple loaf of bread into a banquet-worthy dish, who could blame them for taking the matter so seriously? Who knew that when you spread that butter on your bread, you were partaking in centuries of tradition, audits, and a bit of medieval drama? So next time you slather some butter on your toast, remember, somewhere, a medieval guild master is watching over you, ensuring quality and flavor, one buttery ritual at a time. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. In the annals of medieval history, while knights were jousting and peasants were tilling, a less glamorous, yet equally intriguing aspect of daily life was unfolding: the intricate world of butter quality inspection rituals. Butter, a staple in medieval cuisine, was as subject to scrutiny as the finest silks and spices traded in bustling markets. Here's a brisk overview of the construction methods, bureaucratic rules, roles, technical specifications, and the inevitable wit that made these butter guilds both a necessity and a source of amusement. Construction methods and materials, 12th to 15th century. The butter guilds emerged in the late 12th century, with the first documented guild, the Order of the Butter Keepers, established in Bruges in 1185. The construction of their meeting halls was a blend of local materials and innovative techniques that reflected both functionality and status. 1. Materials. Timber, oak and beech preferred for its availability and strength. Stone, local limestone used for foundational support, especially in larger cities. Thatch or slate, common roofing materials, depending on the region and wealth of the guild. 2. Construction techniques. Post and beam framework. This method allowed for spacious interiors, essential for gatherings and inspections. Wattle and daub, a technique combining woven branches, wattle, and mud, daub, for walls, which was both cost-effective and provided decent insulation. 3. Costs. Building a modest guild hall could range from 10 to 50 marks, approximately $1,500 to $7,500 today, depending on location and materials. By 1400, a lavishly built hall in London could cost up to 150 marks, complete with ornate carvings that depicted butter churns and dairy maids. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. The butter guilds operated under strict regulations, with a codified set of rules governing every aspect of butter production and inspection. The Butter Trade Charter of 1292 is often cited as the foundation of these regulations. Key points included: 1. Quality standards. Butter must not contain more than 2% water and should be free of impurities such as hair or foreign substances. A specific shade of yellow was deemed most desirable, leading to the infamous yellowing clause that required the addition of saffron for color enhancement. 2. Inspections. Inspections were held bi-weekly, conducted by the butter inspectors, or butter beholders, for a more poetic touch. Non-compliance could lead to severe penalties, including fines of up to 20 pence for first-time offenders and up to 3 days in stocks for repeat offenders. 3. Punishments. Punishments were both public and humiliating. Offenders might be forced to parade through town with a butter churn strapped to their backs, a sight that was both a warning and a source of laughter for onlookers. In extreme cases, particularly egregious acts like butter adulteration could lead to banishment from the guild, a fate worse than the stocks for many a butter maker. ##### Roles and job descriptions. Within the guilds, a hierarchy existed that ensured the butter inspection process was both thorough and efficient. Key roles included: 1. Master Butterer. The head of the guild, responsible for overseeing production and ensuring adherence to quality standards. Held the ceremonial title of Lord of the Butter, which sounds grander than it was, as it primarily involved overseeing a lot of dairy. 2. Butter Inspectors. Tasked with evaluating butter quality, they used a variety of tools, including the butter gauge, a primitive, yet effective measurement device. Competence was key. Inspectors had to know their way around a churn and could differentiate between a well-aged butter and one that had overstayed its welcome. 3. Churners. Skilled workers who transformed cream into butter. Their training began at a young age, often starting as apprentice churners at around age 10. They were known for their strong arms and even stronger opinions on the best butter recipes. 4. Butter merchants. Responsible for selling the product, they acted as intermediaries between producers and consumers. Often found engaging in lively debates at market stalls about the merits of one butter over another, leading to the famous saying, "A merchant's tongue is slicker than the butter he sells." ##### Technical specs and inventories. The guilds maintained meticulous records of butter specifications and inventories. By the late 14th century, a standardized system had developed, allowing for better quality control and trade practices. 1. Butter specifications. Texture should be creamy, not grainy, with a smooth mouthfeel. Color: the ideal hue was bright yellow, achieved through both natural and artificial means, like saffron or marigold petals. Smell: fresh butter should have a pleasant, slightly nutty aroma, while rancid butter was to be immediately destroyed. 2. Inventory management. Butter was stored in oak barrels, lined with beeswax to maintain freshness. A typical guild inventory in 1400 might include 100 barrels of salted butter, for long-term storage. 50 barrels of sweet butter, for immediate sale. 10 barrels of fancy butter, infused with herbs or spices for upscale clientele. 3. Inspection records. Each batch inspected was logged, detailing the inspector's findings. A sample entry from 1375 reads, Batch 42, churner, Gene. Quality, good. Infused with rosemary. Recommendation, market ready. #### The rituals of quality inspection. The actual butter inspection rituals took on a ceremonial nature, combining solemnity with a touch of humor. Each inspection day began with the ringing of the butter bell, a charming little contraption that signaled both the start of work and the gathering of gossip. 1. The gathering. Guild members would assemble, each bringing a sample of their best butter. The butter master would preside over the proceedings, often wearing a ceremonial apron adorned with butter-themed embroidery. 2. The tasting. Inspectors would take turns sampling each butter, with a strict protocol, a visual check, a smell test, and finally, a taste. The taste test was often accompanied by exaggerated expressions. As one inspector quipped, "This butter is so bad, it could curdle the milk in a cow's udder." 3. Decision time. After the tasting, a vote would occur, where guild members could voice their opinions. A simple show of hands determined the quality. If a butter failed, a butter bell of shame was rung, drawing laughter and mockery from the crowd. 4. The award ceremony. High-quality butter earned the coveted Golden Churn Award, a small trophy made from gilded wood, while low-quality entries faced the ignominy of being labeled margarine's cousin, a title no butter ever wanted. #### Conclusion. The mundanity of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals belied the intricate social structures and economic practices that flourished around it. From the construction of guild halls to the bureaucratic regulations that governed production, every detail played a role in shaping a community's culinary landscape. The roles carved out within these guilds, from master butterer to aspiring churners, demonstrated a commitment to quality that resonates through time, even if the humor surrounding butter inspections remains as rich as the dairy itself. As we reflect on this era, let us remember, in the world of medieval butter, quality was king, and everyone was just a churn away from glory, or a butter churn away from disgrace. #### The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, where knights clashed and castles towered, there existed a surprisingly intricate world of butter quality inspections. Yes, butter, the creamy, golden elixir of breakfast tables, was not merely a culinary delight but a subject of meticulous scrutiny governed by guilds, rules, and rituals that would baffle the modern mind. Let us embark on this buttery journey through the ages, exploring the construction methods, bureaucratic rules, roles, and technical specifications that define the art of butter inspection. #### Construction methods and materials, 12th to 15th century. The guilds responsible for butter quality inspections were often housed in structures known as butter halls. Constructed primarily of timber and wattle and daub, these buildings were designed with practicality in mind. The roofs, thatched with reeds or straw, provided insulation against the elements, while the large windows allowed ample sunlight to illuminate the butter being scrutinized. Materials used. Oak beams, for structural integrity. Lime plaster, for walls. Thatched straw, for roofing. Stone, for the foundations, particularly in towns where wealth was more abundant. Costs. Construction of a modest butter hall could range from 15 to 50 shillings, depending on the location and the materials used. Wealthy towns might invest more, while rural areas often had simpler constructions. Example timeline. 1200, the first recorded butter hall in York. 1350, expansion of butter halls in London due to increased demand for quality control. ###### bureaucratic rules and punishments. In an age when butter was as essential as gold, regulations surrounding its production and quality were strictly enforced. The guilds established a complex bureaucracy to maintain standards and ensure that no rancid butter slipped through the cracks. Key regulations. Butter must contain no less than 80% milk fat. Lower quality butter could be sold only as margarine, though that term wouldn't be used until much later. Each batch of butter must be tested for consistency and odor. A whiff test was a standard practice. Inspectors were often fondly referred to as butter sniffers. Producers were required to label their butter with the date of production and the name of the maker. Punishments for non-compliance. First offense, a fine of 10 pence. Second offense, public shaming at the market, often involving a butter dunking, where the offender was doused in rancid butter. Third offense, expulsion from the guild, an unforgivable sin in a world where guild membership was synonymous with livelihood. ###### roles and job descriptions. The roles within the butter inspection guilds were as varied as the types of butter they inspected. Each position had its own responsibilities and required a unique set of skills, though all of them needed a keen sense of smell and an appreciation for dairy. Chief Butter Inspector, CBI. Responsibilities: oversee all inspections, train new inspectors, and mediate disputes between producers. Skills needed: extensive knowledge of butter-making processes and an impressive ability to detect even the subtlest notes of rancidity. Assistant inspectors. Responsibilities: assist the CBI in inspections, conduct whiff tests, and maintain records of all butter batches. Skills needed: strong organizational skills and a nose for quality, often referred to as the apprentices of aroma. Guild Secretary. Responsibilities: maintain records of inspections, manage correspondence, and ensure compliance with guild regulations. Skills needed: proficient in Latin for record keeping and able to juggle multiple scrolls without losing track. Butter producers. Responsibilities: create butter that meets guild standards and deliver it to the butter hall for inspection. Skills needed: expertise in dairy farming and butter churning, though some argued that a good sense of humor was just as important to survive in the guild environment. ##### technical specs and inventories. The technical specifications for butter were as detailed as a medieval manuscript, with guilds often issuing strict inventories to ensure uniformity and quality. Butter specifications. Color: Must be a pale yellow, any darker hues indicated poorly fed cows or improper churning. Consistency, should be soft enough to spread easily but firm enough to hold its shape, like the ideal that medieval knights aspired to, but seldom achieved. Odor, must possess a clean, fresh scent, any hint of spoilage or rancidity was grounds for immediate rejection. Inventory items. Butter churns, made of oak. Testing spoons, often made from horn. Scented herbs, like thyme and rosemary, used for masking unpleasant odors in low-quality butter. Scales, for measuring weight, butter was sold by the pound. Example inventory list. 50 oak butter churns. 200 testing spoons. 10 barrels of aromatic herbs. 3 large scales for weighing butter. Hashtag rituals and ceremonies. The quality inspection process was not merely a dry affair of sniffing and testing, it was a ritual steeped in tradition. Each inspection began with a ceremonial washing of hands, an early nod to hygiene that would put many modern practices to shame. Inspection Day Ritual. Opening ceremony. The guild would gather in the butter hall, led by the CBI, who would recite a litany of the guild's founding principles, most of which revolved around the sanctity of butter. With test ceremony, each inspector would take turns presenting their samples, resulting in a rather aromatic circle of buttery goodness. The CBI would then lead a collective sniff, a moment of both seriousness and levity, as it was crucial to maintain a straight face while indulging in the scents of various butters. Final judgment. The CBI would declare the butter fit or unfit for sale, often theatrically raising or lowering a butter wand, signaling the fate of each batch. Annual Butter Festival. Every year, the guild would host a festival celebrating the finest butters of the region. This event included contests, tastings, and even a Best Butter in Show award, complete with a golden butter churn trophy that would go down in history as the most coveted of all culinary prizes. Hashtag conclusion, the legacy of butter inspections. The meticulous rituals and bureaucratic intricacies of butter quality inspections may seem trivial in the grand narrative of medieval history, yet they reflect the values and priorities of a society that placed great importance on quality and community. In a world where the difference between a good and a bad batch of butter could determine a family's livelihood, the role of the guilds, complete with their amusing titles and absurd punishments, was critical. As we reflect on the world of medieval butter inspections, let us not forget the unsung heroes behind our breakfast tables. In many ways, these butter inspectors were the original food critics, armed with nothing but their noses and a rich tapestry of rules, ensuring that the butter we spread today is not just fit for a king, but worthy of an entire guild's approval. So next time you enjoy a slice of toast with butter, remember the medieval guilds and their noble quest for creamy perfection. And if you should happen to catch a whiff of something off, perhaps a neighbor's butter that's more rancid than regal, rest assured that the spirit of the butter inspectors lives on. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. In the medieval era, where life was a tapestry of simplicity, one might assume that butter was merely a spread for daily bread. However, Beneath the surface of this creamy dairy delight lay a complex web of quality inspection rituals, governed by the guilds of the time. These rituals, steeped in tradition, bureaucracy, and a surprising amount of detail, reveal how seriously medieval society took its butter. Construction methods, materials, costs. The butter inspection process began, quite literally, at the ground level. In the 12th century, butter was primarily produced in rural areas, where the construction of dairies became a necessity. Most dairies were simple wooden structures, often built using locally sourced timber. The walls were typically made from wattle and daub, a technique involving woven branches plastered with mud. The roofs were thatched, providing a cozy environment for the production of butter. Materials used for butter making were straightforward. Churns, usually made from oak or ash, were essential. The cost of a churn in the 14th century ranged from 2 to 4 pence, a small fortune for a peasant but a worthy investment for a successful dairy. Each churn had to be well maintained, with regular inspections to ensure no cracks or leaks would affect the quality of the butter produced. The butter itself was produced from the milk of cows, which were also a significant investment. A decent cow could cost anywhere from 10 to 20 shillings, while the upkeep, feeding, milking, and veterinary care could run a peasant dry. Thus, the guilds had a vested interest in ensuring that the butter made was of high quality, as inferior product would lead to financial loss and, more importantly, a tarnished reputation. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. Enter the guilds, the medieval equivalent of modern regulatory agencies but with considerably more pageantry and fewer spreadsheets. By the late 13th century, butter-making guilds had formed in various towns, with established rules and regulations governing the quality of butter. The Guild of Butter Makers in London, for instance, was known for its strict adherence to quality standards and its penchant for imposing penalties on those who deviated from the norms. The rules were detailed, often laid out in elaborate tomes. Butter had to meet certain fat content, texture, and color specifications. A common guideline was that butter should be a pale yellow, not veering towards the sickly green that was sometimes produced from rancid milk. Inspectors, often guild members themselves, would visit dairies unannounced, armed with a set of standards that would make a modern-day inspector blush. Punishments for non-compliance were severe and, at times, downright theatrical. A butter maker found producing substandard butter could face fines ranging from 2 to 10 shillings, a hefty amount for the average worker. If an inspector found the butter particularly egregious, the offending butter might be publicly displayed, with a sign reading, "Beware the butter of shame." The butter would be dumped in the village square, ensuring that the entire community was aware of the transgression. Imagine the scandal, the medieval equivalent of having your bad Yelp review go viral. Roles and job descriptions. The butter quality inspection process involved a hierarchy of roles within the guild. At the top was the master butter maker, a position requiring years of experience and a deep understanding of the nuances of butter production. The master was responsible for training apprentices and ensuring that all guild members adhered to the regulations. Next came the inspectors, often seasoned butter makers themselves, who were tasked with the critical job of evaluating the quality of butter. Inspectors had to possess a keen eye and a discerning palate, with training that included rigorous tasting sessions. They would often be summoned to evaluate butter during local fairs, where competition was fierce and the stakes high. Apprentices were the backbone of the guild, typically starting their training as early as age 12. Their duties included everything from milking cows to cleaning the churns. They learned the trade through hands-on experience, honing their skills under the watchful eye of their masters. Lastly, there were the guild elders, a council of experienced butter makers who enforced rules and resolved disputes. Their meetings, often held in dimly lit taverns over mugs of ale, could last for hours as they debated the merits of different butter-making techniques. Technical specs and inventories. The technical specifications for butter quality were as complex as they were absurdly specific. By the late 15th century, guild records detail the following standards for butter. 1. Fat content must contain at least 80% fat, measured by the butter test, a process involving the melting of a small sample and determining the residue left behind. 2. Color should be a pale yellow, using a system of color cards to match the desired hue. 3. Texture must be smooth and spreadable, with no graininess. Inspectors would often conduct the spread test, where they would spread a sample on a piece of bread to evaluate consistency. 4. Odor fresh, with no hints of rancidity. The sniff test was a common practice, and one could only imagine the olfactory acrobatics required to discern nuances in dairy aroma. 5. Packaging. Butter had to be stored in specific containers, typically wooden tubs or earthenware crocks, which were inspected for cleanliness and structural integrity. Guilds maintained meticulous inventories of their members' butter production, including quantities produced and any instances of non-compliance. Often, these records were kept in ledgers written in Latin, the language of bureaucracy, which only added to the sense of gravitas surrounding the butter-making process. The rituals of inspection. The actual butter inspection ritual was a spectacle, often involving community participation. On designated days, inspectors would parade through the village, trumpets blaring, as they approached the dairy. Butter makers would line up, their best products displayed like trophies. The inspectors would don ceremonial robes, complete with insignias of the guild, and begin their evaluations. The ritual often included 1. The opening ceremony, a blessing of the butter, invoking the spirits of good dairy, accompanied by chants that have sadly been lost to time. 2. The sampling, each butter maker would present a sample. The inspectors would take turns tasting and commenting, often with dramatic flair. A hint of clove. A touch of rancid sheep's wool, were common phrases that sent shivers down the spines of the guilty. 3. The judgment. After sampling, a deliberation period would ensue, sometimes lasting hours. Inspectors would huddle together, debating the merits and faults of each butter sample, all while the anxious butter makers awaited their fate. 4. The declaration. Finally, the inspectors would announce their decisions. Those who passed were awarded a guild seal, signifying high quality. Those who failed faced ridicule and the risk of public humiliation. Conclusion. The butter quality inspection rituals of medieval guilds may seem mundane at first glance, but they reveal a society deeply invested in the quality of its food and the reputation of its producers. The construction methods, materials, and costs associated with butter production were reflective of the era's agricultural practices and economic realities. The bureaucratic rules, stringent punishments, and detailed roles within the guilds illustrate the complexity of what might appear to be a simple process. As we spread our modern butters, let us not forget the painstaking rituals that once accompanied this everyday delight. After all, while we may now take our butter for granted, the medieval guilds remind us that even the most mundane aspects of life can carry profound significance, especially when they come with a side of drama and a dash of bureaucracy. So, next time you slather butter on your toast, spare a thought for the medieval guilds and their tireless, if somewhat eccentric, quest for dairy perfection. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals, a slightly irreverent exploration. Once upon a time, in a world far removed from our modern-day obsessions with avocado toast and artisanal nut butters, there existed a realm where butter was not merely a condiment but a veritable goldmine of economic activity, social stratification, and downright absurdity. Welcome to the medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals, a saga so riveting that it would make even the most lackluster ledger reading seem like a page-turner. Regional variations over time. Imagine, if you will, a bustling medieval marketplace, the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the unmistakable aroma of churned dairy. In this cornucopia of sensory delight, butter was the piece de resistance, but not just any butter. Oh no, dear reader! Each region had its own peculiarities, quirks, and outright eccentricities that dictated the standards of butter quality. In Normandy, for example, butter inspection was akin to a religious rite, steeped in the mystique of local customs and the occasional cow whisperer. The Normans, with their penchant for creamy richness, would often engage in rigorous taste tests, led by the most esteemed members of the guild. It was said that to qualify as a butter inspector, one had to have a palate so refined that they could discern the difference between cow and goat milk just by sniffing the air. Meanwhile, in England, the butter inspectors were less about flavor and more about firmness, engaging in a bizarre ritual of butter wrestling, where they would literally wrestle with blocks of butter to determine their density. But the most peculiar practices arose in the Alpine regions, where the guilds mandated that butter must be inspected at high altitudes. Why? Because the altitude was believed to enhance flavor. The inspectors would journey to the mountains, lugging their heavy ledgers and a few reluctant goats, all to ensure that the butter met the lofty standards of their guild. Not to be outdone, the Scottish guilds insisted on a strict adherence to the three-clap rule. If the butter didn't make a satisfying sound when clapped between the hands, it was deemed unworthy. Laws, edicts, and taxes on creamy delights. As the butter industry flourished, so too did the bureaucratic entanglements surrounding it. The medieval world was nothing if not a tangled web of laws and edicts, and butter was no exception. Townsfolk were governed by an ever-growing list of regulations that not only dictated how butter was produced but also how it was sold, transported, and, of course, taxed. In 1337, King Edward III of England issued the infamous butter tax, a decree so loathed that it sparked butter riots throughout the land. Imagine a throng of angry peasants, pitchforks in hand, marching toward the castle, all in the name of their beloved dairy product. The law required that every pound of butter produced be stamped with a seal, a process that turned out to be as complicated as it sounds. Inspectors had to meticulously log the weight, quality, and origin of each butter batch, leading to a veritable avalanche of ledgers that would make even the most seasoned accountant weep. In France, the guilds took their regulations a step further, with the infamous Edict of Butter Quality, enacted in 1395. This edict mandated that all butter produced within the kingdom must undergo a series of inspections, including a rather amusing, butter-sniffing, test that left many inspectors reeling from the pungent odors wafting up from their samples. The penalties for non-compliance were severe, ranging from hefty fines to public humiliation, a fate worse than death for many a proud butter maker. Logistics and supply chains, the butter trailblazers. Now, you might be wondering how this butter madness was organized, and that's where the logistics come into play. The medieval butter trade was no simple affair. It was a complex network of supply chains that would make a modern-day logistics manager weep with envy. Transporting butter from the countryside to the bustling urban markets involved a delicate choreography of wagons, horses, and sometimes, if you were particularly unlucky, a few treacherous river crossings. Butter was bulky and prone to spoilage, so guilds had to develop ingenious methods to keep their creamy creations from becoming rancid. Some guilds even employed butter bearers, individuals tasked with carrying enormous blocks of butter on their backs, often accompanied by a symphony of grunts and the occasional slip-and-slide moment on a muddy path. The records kept by these guilds are a treasure trove of information, detailing everything from the weight of butter transported to the exact routes taken. One particularly legendary ledger from the 14th century contains the entry, March 15, 1343, 300 pounds of butter delivered to Market Square, 2 butter bearers lost in the swamp, refund requested. It's a captivating glimpse into the logistics of butter transport, showcasing the trials and tribulations of the medieval butter bearers who risked life and limb for the sake of creamy goodness. Record keeping, specifics galore. Speaking of records, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of how these guilds kept track of their buttery endeavors. The art of record keeping was an elaborate affair, requiring not just a quill and ink but also a healthy dose of perseverance and a strong stomach. Butter inspectors maintained extensive ledgers filled with minute details, the cow's name, the date of milking, the temperature of the churn, and even the mood of the butter maker on the day of production. For example, one entry reads, January 12, 1425, butter produced by Marguerite the Mild, churned while humming a slightly off-key tune. These specifics weren't just for show, they served as a form of quality assurance, ensuring that only the finest butter made its way to market. Moreover, guilds would often hold annual gatherings, where they would share their records and inspect one another's butter. These gatherings could turn into rather raucous affairs, with inspectors engaging in friendly rivalries and, on occasion, engaging in butter-themed drinking games. Imagine the spectacle of a room full of dignified guild members attempting to determine the best butter while intoxicated, a scene worthy of a medieval sitcom. A surprising and grotesque anecdote. Now, for the piece de resistance, the anecdote that will leave you both chuckling and slightly horrified. In the year 1356, during the Grand Butter Festival in Ghent, a particularly ambitious butter inspector named Jan decided to up the ante. He proposed a new ritual that involved a butter dunking competition, where contestants would have to submerge themselves in a vat of butter and emerge with a block of the prized dairy product. What could possibly go wrong, you ask? Well, dear reader, it turns out that the combination of hot butter and a competitive spirit can lead to unforeseen consequences. As Jan enthusiastically dove into the vat, he inadvertently triggered a chain reaction, causing the vat to tip over and spill its slippery contents all over the festival grounds. Chaos ensued as participants and onlookers alike found themselves sliding around in a sea of butter, creating a scene reminiscent of a slapstick comedy. The townsfolk, initially horrified, soon found themselves laughing uncontrollably as they slipped, slid, and ultimately embraced the buttery mayhem. To this day, the event is commemorated in Ghent as the Great Butter Slip, a testament to the absurd lengths to which medieval folk would go in the name of quality control. Conclusion: a legacy of butter and bureaucracy. And so, we arrive at the end of our buttery journey through the hallowed halls of medieval guilds and their bizarre quality inspection rituals. From regional variations and legal entanglements to the logistics of transport and the meticulous record-keeping, the world of butter in the Middle Ages was anything but mundane. While we may chuckle at the absurdities of the past, it's essential to recognize the legacy of these practices. The modern dairy industry, with its own set of quality standards and inspections, owes a tip of the hat to those medieval guilds that paved the way for the smooth, creamy spreads we enjoy today. So the next time you slather butter on your toast, take a moment to appreciate the rich tapestry of history that brought that golden goodness to your breakfast table, and maybe, just maybe, offer a toast to Jan and his ill-fated butter dunking competition. Cheers to butter. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. Once upon a time, in the grand tapestry of medieval life, where knights clanged their armor and peasants plowed the fields, an unassuming yet crucial aspect of daily existence unfolded: the butter. Yes, butter. The creamy, dreamy spread that adorned the crusty loaves of bread and graced the tables of both the peasant and the princely alike. But, dear reader, do not let the smoothness of butter fool you. Behind its golden sheen lay a labyrinthine world of guilds, regulations, and the occasional dash of grotesque humor. ##### Regional variations over time. Butter quality inspection rituals varied significantly across regions, each with its own peculiarities. In England, where the grass was greener and cows were abundant, the Guild of Butter Makers established a system that would make any modern quality control officer weep with envy, or possibly horror. Here, a butter inspector donned a ceremonial gown, adorned with cow motifs and a hat that could only be described as utterly ridiculous. They would parade through the village, clutching a wooden paddle, their version of a magic wand, bestowing blessings upon the finest butters while mercilessly slapping the inferior ones. Meanwhile, in the bustling markets of Flanders, the guilds took a more bureaucratic approach. They introduced laws and edicts that would put most modern tax codes to shame. Each batch of butter had to be logged meticulously, with records detailing the cow's diet, the day of milking, the temperature of the churn, and even the weather conditions, because who doesn't want to know if a storm cloud might have tainted the butter's flavor? The Flemish butter makers were the original overthinkers, and their ledgers could rival Tolstoy in length and existential angst. ##### laws, edicts, taxes, ledgers. As the love for butter spread, pun intended, local governments began to take an interest in the profits generated by this dairy delight. Laws were enacted to ensure that the butter wasn't just good but great. In the 12th century, King John of England famously decreed the Butter Quality Edict of 1215, which mandated that all butter sold in the kingdom must meet a specified standard of richness and texture. Failure to comply meant a hefty fine, which would be paid in, what else, butter. Talk about a sticky situation. But it didn't stop there. Taxes were levied based on butter production, leading to a thriving black market where unsanctioned butter dealers would sell their wares under the cover of night. These clandestine operations, known as butter smuggling, became the stuff of legend. Butter was so prized that it rivaled the value of gold in some circles. Imagine trying to hide a wheel of butter in your cloak while evading the ever-vigilant guild inspectors. Now that's a heist film waiting to happen. #### logistics and supply chains. The logistics of butter production and distribution were, quite frankly, a medieval nightmare. Picture this. A butter maker in the picturesque countryside needed to transport their freshly churned butter to the market in the nearest town, which could be a half-day's walk away. They would load their butter into wooden barrels, carefully sealing them with cloth and salt, because no one wants to dip into a barrel of rancid butter. As the butter traveled, it encountered various checkpoints, where inspectors would taste a spoonful with a look of utter seriousness. If the butter passed muster, it was stamped with a guild seal, a mark of honor that said, "Yes, you can spread this on your bread without fear of gastric distress." But if it didn't? Well, let's just say that the butter was often unceremoniously dumped into the nearest pig pen, much to the delight of the swine. Now, if you thought the logistics of transporting butter were chaotic, let's talk about the supply chains. Butter was often traded for other goods, grains, vegetables, and even livestock. The butter trade was a delicate dance, requiring skilled negotiators who could barter like seasoned merchants. "I'll give you 3 pounds of butter for that cow, but only if you throw in a dozen eggs." Negotiations could take hours, and heaven forbid if someone suggested a lower quality butter, the town crier would be summoned, and a public shaming would ensue. #### record keeping with lots of specifics. In the heart of this buttery chaos lay the meticulous records kept by guild members. The ledgers were not merely lists of transactions but elaborate documents filled with details that would make a modern accountant swoon. Each entry noted the date, the type of butter, the weight, and, believe it or not, a description of the butter's color and aroma. This butter has a delightful golden hue reminiscent of a summer sunrise and a scent that whispers sweet nothings. It was quality assurance mixed with poetic flair. Inspections were a ritual in themselves. Every month, guild members gathered for the great butter tasting, where they would sit in a circle, armed with spoons and a refined palate. They would sample each other's butters while engaging in heated debates over the merits of different churning techniques. "I tell you, the secret is in the elbow grease," one would proclaim, while another would counter, "Nonsense. It's all about the cow's diet." And let's not forget the infamous Butter Hall of Shame, a ledger dedicated to the worst offenders in the guild. Here, the details were more scandalous than a tabloid newspaper. Butter that was deemed unfit for consumption was documented with glee, complete with the name of the offender and a detailed account of their missteps. Sir Reginald's butter was found to be rancid. He shall be known henceforth as Reginald the Rancid. Guild members relished the opportunity to mock their rivals, and the Hall of Shame became a source of entertainment. #### A surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, dear reader, buckle up for a tale that might make you reconsider your next slice of toast. One particularly infamous incident involved a butter maker named Ethelred the Unfortunate, not to be confused with his far more successful cousin, Ethelred the Conqueror. Ethelred was known for his peculiar methods, which included a rather unsavory practice of adding a secret ingredient to his butter to enhance its flavor. What was this secret ingredient, you ask? The answer lies in the realm of the grotesque. Ethelred believed that cow dung, when mixed into the butter, imparted a unique, earthy flavor. He was convinced that this organic touch would set his butter apart from the rest. After all, what's a little dung among friends? At the next guild meeting, Ethelred proudly presented his new creation, dubbing it Rustic Delight. As the inspectors took their first spoonfuls, a wave of horror washed over the room. The expressions on their faces ranged from confusion to disgust, and someone even fainted at the mere thought of consuming something so foul. Ethelred was promptly expelled from the guild, and his butter was forever banished to the annals of history, serving as a cautionary tale for aspiring butter makers. #### Conclusion. And so, dear reader, we find ourselves at the end of our buttery journey through the mundane yet utterly fascinating world of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. What began as a simple exploration of a dairy product turned into a saga filled with regulations, logistics, and a dash of grotesque humor. The next time you spread butter on your morning toast, remember the guilds that toiled tirelessly to ensure that what you're enjoying is not just any butter, but a product of meticulous quality control, poetry, and, on occasion, a touch of the absurd. So raise a toast, preferably with a slab of that glorious, guild-approved butter, and savor the rich history that lies between the slices. Title: The Buttered Chronicles, a witty dive into the mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. Ah, butter! The golden spread that has graced our tables since time immemorial, bringing joy to our bread and despair to our waistlines. But let us not forget that behind every dollop of creamy goodness lies a rich tapestry of historical intrigue, particularly when it comes to the medieval guilds that once deemed themselves the divine custodians of butter quality. Yes, you heard right. The butter business was serious business, and it's high time we churn through the details. Regional variations over time, the buttery spectrum. Let's set the stage. Picture medieval Europe, a land rife with political turmoil, religious fervor, and an unyielding obsession with dairy products. Different regions developed their own unique butter quality inspection rituals. In some corners of the continent, you had the flamboyant French guilds, who would inspect butter with the flair of a Parisian fashion show, complete with berets and baguettes. Meanwhile, the English guilds took a more stoic, almost somber approach, as if inspecting butter were akin to judging a funeral. In the north, Scandinavian guilds were notorious for their rigorous quality inspections. Here, butter wasn't just a culinary delight, it was a matter of survival against the harsh winters. The Norse understood that the slightest inconsistency could lead to a dire situation, such as running out of butter mid-fish and root vegetable season. In their quest for perfection, these guilds employed a method known as the butter tug-of-war, wherein two guild members would stretch the butter between them to test its elasticity. If it snapped like a Viking's temper, the butter was deemed inferior. Across the Alps, Swiss guilds were no less concerned. Their butter inspection process included a rather peculiar ritual involving cowbells, which they believed could ward off evil spirits from spoiling their dairy. The sound of jingling bells was thought to signal to the cows that their milk was destined for greatness. You might think this is a quaint superstition, but in a world where butter could represent both wealth and status, who were we to judge? Laws, edicts, taxes, and the butter bureaucracy. Of course, it wouldn't be a proper medieval affair without a dash of bureaucracy. Enter the myriad laws, edicts, and taxes that governed the butter trade. Guilds were not merely concerned with quality, they were also deeply entrenched in the political machinations of their time. In England, for instance, King Henry III once decreed that all butter must be inspected before being sold. This wasn't just a whimsical whim of a bored monarch, it was a strategic move to curb the rampant butter fraud that had taken hold of the streets. Imagine the chaos: unscrupulous butter merchants selling chalky imitations, and hapless peasants unknowingly spreading inferior spreads on their scones. So, to combat this, guilds were empowered to create regulations that dictated everything from the color of the butter to the specific gravity of the product. Yes, that's right, medieval butter had a weight class. Taxation on butter production was equally convoluted. Guilds had to navigate a maze of taxes levied by local lords and the church. Butter was often seen as a luxury item, and as such, it attracted the kind of taxes that would make even the most seasoned tax accountant weep. But fear not, for guilds found inventive ways to dodge these taxes. They would sometimes classify their product as medicinal butter, claiming that it had health benefits akin to a potion brewed by the finest alchemist. This ploy not only saved them a pretty penny but also allowed them to charge a premium, because who wouldn't want to spread something that promised to cure their ailments? Logistics and supply chains, the unsung heroes of butter. Now, let's not gloss over the logistics involved in this buttery enterprise. The transportation of butter was a logistical nightmare, akin to herding cats, if those cats were laden with heavy churns of dairy products. It wasn't just a matter of picking up a tub of butter from the local market, oh no, dear reader. The supply chains of medieval butter were intricate webs of trade routes, taverns, and dubious characters who might or might not have been smuggling something other than dairy. Butter had to be transported quickly to avoid spoilage, which is a fancy way of saying that the medieval butter industry had to be nimble on its feet. Merchants would load their carts with butter, often racing against the clock to keep it cool. No ice packs or refrigerated trucks here. Instead, they relied on clever tactics, such as packing the butter in cool, damp cloths or even surrounding it with barrels of cold water. One can only imagine the sight of disheveled merchants racing down muddy roads, cursing the heavens as they prayed for a cool breeze to save their precious cargo. In some regions, guilds developed sophisticated networks with neighboring towns to ensure a steady supply of fresh butter. They would meet at designated crossroads, where time-honored rituals of bartering would take place, often involving a fair amount of haggling, shouting, and the occasional fistfight. Who knew that the medieval butter trade could have such a spicy flavor? Record keeping, the Butter Ledger Chronicles. Now, if you thought the butter business was all about slathering on the goodness, think again. Record keeping was vital in this industry, and medieval guilds took their ledgers very seriously. Every pound of butter produced, inspected, and sold was meticulously documented, creating a labyrinthine system of records that would make even modern accountants weep with envy. The butter inspections were entered into ledgers with the fervor of a religious scribe. Each page was filled with specifics: the date of inspection, the name of the butter maker, the quality rating, ranging from heavenly to sacrilegious, and, of course, notes on the color and texture. Some guilds even employed the use of butter inspectors, men with an uncanny ability to sniff out inferior butter. These inspectors often fancied themselves as the butter aristocracy, donning fine garments to set themselves apart from the common folk. But what happened if a batch of butter failed inspection? The guilds had a system in place for that too. The offending butter was marked with a special seal, often depicting a sad cow, and was relegated to a special butter graveyard. Here, inferior butter languished until it was deemed fit for animal feed or, in some particularly gruesome cases, used in the production of soap. Yes, dear reader, the next time you lather up, remember the sacrifices made by those unsatisfactory butter batches. A surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, before we wrap this buttery saga, let me regale you with a particularly grotesque anecdote that has lingered in the annals of butter history. In 14th century Flanders, a certain guild was known for its rather unorthodox inspection method. Legend has it that one ambitious inspector decided to take a hands-on approach. He believed that by plunging his hands deep into the butter, he could ascertain its quality through sheer touch. However, one fateful day, as the inspector immersed himself in a vat of butter, a rather unfortunate incident occurred. A rogue rat, having been drawn to the buttery aroma, took a liking to the warm, gooey mass. In a moment of sheer horror, the inspector yanked his hands out, only to find that he had inadvertently created a butter-rat amalgamation that would haunt the guild for years to come. From that day forward, the guild instituted a strict, no-hands policy when it came to butter inspections. The story of the rat butter became a cautionary tale, reminding inspectors everywhere that some rituals are best left to the imagination. Conclusion: the legacy of butter quality inspections. As we conclude this whimsical journey through the history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals, let us take a moment to appreciate the unsung heroes of the butter world. These guilds, with their laws, logistics, and ludicrous anecdotes, paved the way for the creamy delights we enjoy today. So, the next time you slather butter on your toast, remember the intricate history behind that simple act. After all, you might just be spreading a slice of medieval bureaucracy, one buttery bite at a time. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals, a spreader for all seasons. Once upon a time, in a land not so far away, unless you were a peasant trudging through mud to get to the next town, butter was not merely a condiment, it was a currency, a status symbol, and a veritable delicacy. But of course, with great spreadability came great responsibility. Enter the medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals, a comedic ballet of bureaucracy, regional quirks, and, dare I say, borderline grotesque anecdotes that keep us all on the edge of our butter knives. ### regional variations over time, a real spread of styles. When it comes to butter, the medieval world was nothing if not diverse. Much like modern-day artisanal cheese shops, different regions flaunted their own butter styles, each claiming superiority. In Normandy, the butter was rich, creamy, and as golden as the sun-kissed fields from which it came. Meanwhile, in the hills of Bavaria, they were churning out a more rustic, tangy variety that was less about finesse and more about keeping the peasants from starving. As the years rolled by, these regional differences became enshrined in law, thanks to a series of butter edicts that would make even the most ardent FDA inspector nod in approval. In England, for instance, the Butter Act of 1323 decreed that only butter made from cow's milk could bear the title butter. Goat butter? Don't even think about it. And in the bustling markets of Florence, a group of enterprising merchants decided that their butter should float in olive oil, because why not? A little liquid gold never hurt anyone, right? Of course, these regional variations also meant that the guilds had to adapt their inspection rituals. In the north, inspectors donned woolen cloaks to stave off the chill, while those in the Mediterranean opted for more breathable fabrics. But irrespective of the regional flavor, one thing remained consistent: a lot of bureaucratic red tape. ### laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers, a butter taxonomy. Ah, the mystical world of medieval law. Here, it seems, butter was both the bread and the butter of society, pun fully intended. Guilds were the gatekeepers of quality assurance, and they wielded their power with the ferocity of a knight defending his castle. Each guild maintained a hefty tome of laws and regulations, often written in Latin, which was particularly useful for confusing the average butter enthusiast. These laws dictated everything from the acceptable fat content of butter to the exact dimensions of the wooden churn used for production. Yes, there were even regulations on the churn. Did it have a lid? Was it well seasoned? A poorly churned butter could lead to dire consequences, including public humiliation at the market, not to mention a potential fine that could bankrupt a butter merchant faster than you could say, Uncle Roger's skimpy spread. Taxes on butter were another delightful aspect of this rich tapestry. Local lords, always eager to squeeze a few extra coins from the peasants, would impose butter taxes that could rival modern-day grocery prices. This meant that the guilds had to keep meticulous ledgers. Inspectors were often found hunched over these tomes, quills scratching furiously as they noted each transaction, each pound of butter tested, and each dubious bribe received. Imagine the thrill of a ledger entry reading, 2 pounds of butter, deemed acceptable, followed by a conspicuously large gift of cheese from the producer. The butter economy was rife with intrigue and, of course, a smattering of corruption. Hashtag logistics and supply chains, butter on the move. Now, let's talk logistics. In an era where, just in time, meant having enough provisions to last until the next harvest, the logistics of butter transport were nothing short of Herculean. The butter had to travel from farms to market, often traversing mud-laden paths that would make a modern-day delivery driver weep. The guilds implemented a system of butter runners, individuals tasked with ensuring that the product arrived in pristine condition. These runners were essentially the medieval equivalent of a food delivery service, but instead of slick scooters and smartphone apps, they relied on sturdy horses and a prayer. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing, or churning. The butter often changed hands multiple times along the route, leading to questionable practices. Some clever merchants would mix in lower quality fats, all while praying to Saint Lactose that their customers wouldn't notice. The guilds, of course, had their own network of spies, which is a fancy way of saying they had some very nosy neighbors who loved to gossip. Hashtag record keeping with lots of specifics, the devil is in the details. You might think that keeping tabs on butter quality would be a straightforward affair, but the medieval guilds took this task as seriously as a knight about to enter a jousting tournament. Records were kept with the kind of specificity that would make even the most meticulous accountant weep with joy. Every batch of butter inspected would come with a detailed report, often including origin. Where did the milk come from? Was it from a cow that was happy and frolicking in the fields or one that had been subjected to the whims of a cranky farmer? Color. Was it a vibrant yellow, indicating a diet rich in clover? Or was it the pallid hue of desperation, perhaps mixed with a bit of diseased milk? Texture. Was it smooth as a bard's ballad or grainy as a poorly written sonnet? Smell. Did it have the fragrant aroma of fresh pastures or the stench of something that should have been left in the sun a bit longer? These reports were then carefully filed away, often in a damp corner of the guild hall where they would molder over time, serving as a cautionary tale for future butter inspectors. Hashtag one surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote, the Great Butter Scandal. Now, dear reader, we must delve into the annals of history to unearth a tale that rivals the most grotesque of horror stories. It was a fine summer day in 1378 when the town of Breton found itself embroiled in what would come to be known as the Great Butter Scandal. It all started when an ambitious butter merchant named Alaric decided to take a shortcut in his production methods. Instead of using fresh milk, he opted for a secret ingredient, namely, the milk of a cow rumored to be possessed. Yes, you read that right. The townsfolk swore that this cow had the ability to speak in tongues, and its milk was thought to be a gift from the devil himself. Alaric, however, was undeterred by the rumors. He mixed this otherworldly milk into his butter and sent it off for inspection. The guild inspectors, upon sampling the butter, were immediately struck by a sensation that can only be described as otherworldly. They reported feeling dizzy and hearing faint whispers of ancient incantations, hardly the kind of experience you want from your breakfast spread. As word spread, panic ensued. A witch hunt, pun absolutely intended, erupted, with townsfolk accusing each other of witchcraft and dairy-related sorcery. The guild was forced to intervene, leading to a dramatic trial that included a very confused cow being paraded around the town square as evidence. In the end, Alaric was found guilty of butter corruption, and the cow was granted a reprieve, subsequently becoming the town's unofficial mascot. Alaric. He was sentenced to a lifetime of butter making, under the watchful eye of the guild, of course. Conclusion, the legacy of butter inspections. So, what can we learn from the rich tapestry of medieval butter quality inspection rituals? Perhaps that bureaucracy can sometimes lead to absurdity, that corruption is as old as time, and that, ultimately, nothing, absolutely nothing, can stand in the way of a well-churned batch of butter. These inspections may seem mundane now, but they were the backbone of a thriving economy, an intricate dance of regional pride, and a testament to humanity's eternal quest for quality dairy products. So the next time you slather butter on your toast, take a moment to appreciate the centuries of tradition and absurdity behind that humble spread. Cheers to the butter guilds of yore, who taught us that even the most mundane of tasks can have a touch of the extraordinary. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. Once upon a time in a land not so far away, where knights wore rusting armor and peasants pined for the sweet taste of freedom, and perhaps a decent loaf of bread, butter was not just a culinary delight but a matter of life and death. Well, at least life and a particularly unpalatable dinner. This is the tale of the medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals, a riveting saga filled with regional variations, laws, taxes, and an astonishingly detailed record-keeping system that would make even the most pedantic accountant weep tears of joy, or perhaps horror. Regional variations over time, the butter belt. You see, medieval Europe was a patchwork quilt of cultures, each with its own flavor, pun intended, of butter-making practices. In the Northeast, the butter was churned with a fervor that could rival a Viking raid, often taking on a salty tang that reflected the coastal influences. Meanwhile, in the sun-dappled fields of the South, butter was as sweet as a troubadour's serenade, infused with herbs and floral notes that could almost make you believe it was made by angels. But beware, dear reader, for this regional variety was not merely about taste. The butter produced in Normandy had to undergo rigorous inspections, conducted by the esteemed Société de Burriers, yes, that's right, the Butter Society, whose members prided themselves on their discerning palates and sharp noses. They would sniff and sample, all while maintaining a dignified air that said, "Yes, I am judging your dairy product, and yes, I feel superior." In stark contrast, the butter inspectors of Scotland, known for their rather more boisterous approach, would often engage in spirited debates over the merits of their local churns, sometimes even resorting to impromptu butter-throwing contests. Ah, the joys of medieval quality control! Laws, edicts, and taxes, butter's legal labyrinth. As with all things medieval, the world of butter was not without its legal entanglements. The Butter Act of 1235, for instance, imposed a hefty tax on all butter produced in England, ensuring that the Crown could continue its lavish lifestyle while the common folk struggled to afford their morning toast. The Act also mandated that any butter sold at market had to be stamped with the official seal of the local guild, a delightful piece of bureaucracy designed to keep the peasants in check. But the laws didn't stop there. In 1280, the city of Brussels passed an edict requiring all butter to be inspected for quality before it could be sold. This led to the creation of detailed ledgers, which documented each and every batch of butter inspected, along with the names of the inspectors and their often colorful comments. One particularly verbose inspector was known to write, "This butter smells like the love child of a cow and a goat, proceed with caution." Imagine trying to decipher that kind of prose during your morning reading. You'd be left questioning your life choices and the very nature of dairy itself. Logistics and supply chains, the butter flow. Now, let's talk logistics. How did butter make its way from the churn to the dinner table? It wasn't a simple matter of, just churn and serve. Oh no, my friends, it involved a complex web of supply chains that would make modern-day logistics managers weep with envy, or perhaps despair. Butter was often transported in large wooden barrels, carefully sealed to keep the pungent aroma at bay. These barrels were loaded onto carts, pulled by oxen that were, quite frankly, far more reliable than the medieval postal service. The journey could take days, if not weeks, depending on the distance and the number of taverns along the way. Merchants had to navigate treacherous roads, dodge bandits, who apparently had a particular fondness for dairy products, and ensure their precious cargo remained intact. The fear of butter spoilage was so great that some merchants developed a secret language involving hand signals and clever code words to communicate about their wares without drawing too much attention. "The cow is in the meadow" might indicate a fresh batch of butter, while "the goat is chasing the chicken" could mean trouble on the horizon. Record keeping, the chronicles of butter. As the butter industry blossomed, so too did the need for meticulous record keeping. Each guild maintained a comprehensive ledger, documenting everything from the quantity of butter produced to the results of the latest quality inspections. These ledgers were often written in a mix of Latin and the local vernacular, which made them nearly impossible for the average peasant to understand but absolutely riveting for historians centuries later. Consider the case of the Guild of Butter Makers in the year 1345. Their records show that a whopping 12,000 pounds of butter were inspected that year, with an astonishing 3,000 pounds deemed unfit for human consumption. The inspectors, rather than simply throwing the rancid butter away, had a rather unique solution. They donated it to the local orphanage, where it was used in baking bread. A noble gesture, one might argue, but one can only imagine the children's faces when they took a bite of that butter-laden loaf and realized they had been duped into consuming what could only be described as the culinary equivalent of a bad hangover. An anecdote of the grotesque, the butter pudding incident. And now, dear reader, we arrive at the piece de resistance of our butter saga, the infamous butter pudding incident of 1397. It was a fateful autumn day when the Guild of Butter Makers in York decided to host a grand feast to celebrate their bountiful harvest. The centerpiece? A towering butter pudding, crafted from the finest dairy products and infused with the essence of local herbs. However, as the pudding was being prepared, a rather unfortunate mishap occurred. A novice cook, eager to impress his fellow guild members, accidentally used rancid butter instead of the fresh batch. The pudding was served to the guests, who took one bite and were immediately struck with a combination of horror and disbelief. Legend has it that the reaction was so pronounced that some guests fainted, while others rushed to the nearest chamber pot. The guild members, horrified and embarrassed, quickly attempted to salvage the situation by declaring it a new delicacy, known as pudding à la rancid, but the damage was done. The story spread like wildfire, and for years to come, the guild was mocked as the pudding purveyors of peril. Conclusion: the legacy of butter quality inspections. And so, dear reader, we see that the history of medieval guild butter quality inspections is not merely a tale of dairy but a microcosm of human endeavor, fraught with the trials and tribulations of everyday life. It's a reminder that even in the most mundane of practices, there lies an extraordinary tapestry of culture, law, and the occasional grotesque anecdote. So, the next time you spread a little butter on your toast, take a moment to appreciate the centuries of effort that have gone into perfecting that creamy delight. And remember, behind every pat of butter is a story waiting to be told, one that involves more than just cows and churns, but also a little bit of chaos and a whole lot of laughter. ####The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. In the bustling markets of medieval Europe, where the clamor of traders and the aroma of fresh produce mingled in the air, the humble butter was anything but a mundane commodity. This creamy delight, derived from churning cow's milk, held significant economic and social value. Yet, behind its golden facade lay a complex web of guild regulations, inspections, and rituals that ensured the quality and integrity of this vital product. As we delve into the historical minutiae of butter quality inspection rituals, we unearth a tapestry of minor figures, petty rules, and curious case studies that paint a vivid picture of life in the medieval marketplace. #####minor figures and petty rules. At the heart of the butter guilds were not just the master butter makers, but a legion of minor figures who played critical roles in the grand scheme of quality control. Among these were the butter inspectors, or butter wardens, as they were sometimes called, who were often low-ranking members of the guild, yet wielded considerable power. Their primary job was to assess the quality of butter based on a series of quirky and often petty regulations. For example, one obscure rule mandated that all butter must be packed in specific types of containers, either wooden barrels or clay pots, depending on the region. Failure to comply could result in hefty fines or, in extreme cases, public shaming at the local market square. In the city of Bruges, a particularly strict guild insisted that if a butter maker's product was found to be underweight by even a single ounce, they were required to stand outside the guild hall wearing a sign that read, "Light Butter Maker," a punishment that served both as a deterrent and a source of amusement for onlookers. In Yorkshire, the guild rules were even more absurdly specific. A 1342 regulation mandated that butter must be churned only on Tuesdays and Fridays. This was supposedly to align with favorable astrological conditions, but it also created an entertaining spectacle of butter makers racing against time to churn their product before the guild inspectors arrived. Any butter produced outside of these days was deemed illegitimate, and was often used for animal fodder rather than sold in markets. #######. Case studies with dates and lists. The importance of butter quality inspections can be underscored through various case studies. One notable incident occurred in London in 1387, when a large consignment of butter arrived from the countryside. The guild inspectors, led by the formidable Master Wulfric, discovered that the butter was tainted with a rancid odor. On inspection, it was found that the butter had been stored in a poorly maintained cellar, which lacked proper ventilation. The guild not only confiscated the butter but ordered the offending dairy farmer, Margaret of Whitechapel, to appear before the guild court, where she was sentenced to provide free butter to the local orphanage for a year as penance. This incident not only emphasized the guild's commitment to quality but also its role in community welfare. Another fascinating case occurred in 1345 in Flanders, where a scandal erupted over the introduction of fake butter. A devious merchant, Hugo the Greedy, mixed inferior animal fats with a small percentage of real butter to cut costs. The guild inspectors, noticing an unusually high incidence of complaints, conducted a mass inspection. The outcome was a public trial where Hugo was found guilty, and his punishment was to be paraded through the town with a barrel of his concoction strapped to his back. The incident not only led to stricter regulations regarding butter production but also sparked a movement advocating for better labeling practices in food production. ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### quality inspection rituals of medieval Europe, it is evident that practices varied significantly by region. In northern Italy, for instance, the guilds focused heavily on the aesthetics of butter. A 1380 regulation decreed that butter could be colored only with specific saffron or other natural dyes, which made the butter more appealing to buyers. Inspectors were known to carry small glass vials to test the authenticity of colors, and any butter found to be artificially colored was promptly destroyed. In contrast, the Scandinavian butter guilds took a more pragmatic approach. In Norway, butter was often inspected for salt content rather than for color or aroma, reflecting the region's reliance on salted butter for preservation. In a 1422 ruling, it was declared that butter exceeding a salt content of 15% would be confiscated, a regulation that arose as a direct response to complaints about overly salty butter that made bread inedible. The French guilds, particularly in regions like Normandy, were famous for their butter quality, often referred to as the Gold of Normandy. The guild inspectors here were meticulous, employing a method known as the butter test, where they would take a sample and measure its consistency and taste against a standardized benchmark. This practice was so revered that it became an art form in itself, with inspectors earning the nickname, butter sommeliers. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological discoveries have further illuminated our understanding of medieval butter quality inspection rituals. In excavations near Bristol, remnants of ancient butter churns and containers have been unearthed, revealing the intricate designs that were often employed. Some churns, dating back to the 12th century, were inscribed with guild symbols that signified quality assurance. Moreover, fragments of written guild records have surfaced in various archives, detailing the regulations that governed butter production. One such document from Bruges, dated 1385, contained a list of approved butter makers who had met the guild's stringent standards. The document also included a ledger of fines imposed on those who failed inspections, creating a fascinating glimpse into the economic pressures faced by butter makers. Interestingly, a rare find in the Cathedral of St. Peter in Regensburg, Germany, included a butter mold that bore the insignia of the local guild. This mold was used to shape butter into decorative forms, often to signify quality. The discovery of such artifacts not only highlights the guild's influence on production practices but also suggests that presentation was as important as taste in the medieval marketplace. Rhetorical questions that hook curiosity. But what drove these guilds to enforce such peculiar regulations? Was it truly a matter of quality, or were there underlying social dynamics at play that revealed deeper tensions within medieval society? As we ponder these questions, we are reminded that the seemingly mundane world of butter production was intertwined with the very fabric of daily life, reflecting broader themes of community, commerce, and competition in the medieval period. Conclusion. The history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals is a fascinating exploration of the intersection between commerce, community, and culture. From minor figures like butter wardens to the absurdities of petty rules, every aspect reveals the lengths to which society went to ensure quality and integrity in its most basic commodities. The case studies demonstrate that the stakes were high, not just for the butter makers, but for the entire community reliant on these products. As we sift through the archaeological findings, we gain insights into the lives of those who toiled in the shadows of the great guilds, shaping the foodstuff that nourished generations. The rituals of inspection, though seemingly mundane, were anything but. They were a reflection of a society grappling with issues of quality, trust, and the ever-present desire for improvement. In the end, the tale of butter inspections is not just about dairy, it is a window into the vibrant tapestry of medieval life, where every churn of butter tells a story of resilience, regulation, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. In the vast tapestry of medieval life, where the grand narratives of kings, queens, and epic battles often overshadow the minutiae of everyday existence, the rituals surrounding butter quality inspection stand as a peculiar yet fascinating testament to the intricate web of social, economic, and culinary practices of the time. While butter might seem a humble foodstuff today, its production, distribution, and quality were intricately tied to the fabric of medieval society, revealing a world filled with minor figures, petty rules, and local customs that shaped the lives of countless individuals. Hashtag 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 minor figures and petty rules. Medieval guilds were not merely professional associations, they were the lifeblood of local economies, controlling the production and sale of numerous goods. Butter guilds emerged in various regions, notably in areas where dairy farming was prevalent. Lesser-known figures, like the butter inspector or the warden of the cream, held positions of significance within these guilds, wielding power over the quality of butter produced and sold. Their titles often reflected the local language and culture. For instance, in Normandy, the term garde-beurre was common, while in England, one might encounter butter wardens. The rules governing butter quality were often petty, reflecting the guild's obsession with minutiae. For example, the Guild of St. Ives in Cornwall had a regulation stating that butter must be no less than 1 ounce in weight per quarter pound. Failure to comply resulted in fines payable to the guild, a sum that might seem trivial today but represented a significant financial burden for a struggling dairy farmer. Similarly, the Guild of Butter Merchants in York mandated that butter must be sold at a specific temperature, insisting that it should never be warmer than the hand of the inspector. Such seemingly absurd rules highlight the lengths to which these guilds went to maintain standards and protect their interests. Hashtag 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 case studies with dates and lists. The historical records reveal numerous case studies that illustrate the importance of butter quality inspection. In a notable incident from 1357 in Bruges, a group of disgruntled butter producers petitioned the local guild after discovering that the butter inspectors had been accepting bribes in exchange for passing inferior products. The guild responded by conducting a public trial, where inspectors were forced to stand before an assembly of townsfolk. The resulting scandal led to the implementation of stricter oversight, including the establishment of a Butter Quality Council, made up of both guild members and local dignitaries, which met every first Tuesday of the month to review inspection practices. Another example can be found in 1425 in London, where the Butter Merchants Guild enforced a strict policy against the sale of creamy butter, a term used to describe butter with a high water content, which was considered inferior. This led to a series of inspections that included a butter tasting day, where local citizens were invited to sample differing qualities of butter. Records from the event list the various types of butter sampled, including golden gilt, pale pudding, and stale sludge, each accompanied by a detailed account of texture, aroma, and taste. The guild took these results seriously, and penalties were swiftly imposed on merchants who failed to adhere to the guidelines. Hashtag 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 comparisons to other regions. The practices surrounding butter quality inspection varied dramatically across regions, revealing the cultural differences that influenced these guilds. In the Netherlands, for instance, the butter market in Gouda became famous for its elaborate butter weighing ceremonies, which involved the use of specially designed scales and a ceremonial butter bell used to announce the start of market day. This tradition was in stark contrast to the more austere inspections conducted in England, where the focus was primarily on the technical specifications of the butter itself, rather than the ritualistic aspects of the sale. In Scandinavia, butter quality was often judged by its color and texture, with a specific emphasis on the presence of golden flecks, which were believed to indicate high-quality milk. The guilds in these regions celebrated the Butter Festival, a vibrant event marked by music, dancing, and the sharing of butter-related recipes, showcasing a communal approach to butter production that diverged from the more individualistic practices found in England and France. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological evidence sheds light on the daily practices of butter guilds and the social dynamics surrounding them. Excavations in the medieval city of Lübeck, Germany, revealed remnants of butter churns and molds, some adorned with intricate designs that indicated their owners' guild affiliations. These artifacts provide a glimpse into the artistry involved in butter production and the pride that artisans took in their craft. In the village of L'Isle-sur-la-Sorgue in France, an archaeological dig uncovered a cache of butter-making tools dating back to the 12th century, including wooden paddles and clay storage vessels. Researchers also found markings on the vessels that corresponded to guild insignias, suggesting that even the containers used for storage were subject to guild regulations. This finding implies that the oversight of butter quality extended beyond just the product itself, encompassing every aspect of its production and sale. Moreover, the discovery of a 14th-century butter mold in a rural English estate revealed the presence of a local guild that had long since faded from historical records. The mold was engraved with the name of the estate, indicating that the quality of butter produced there was of such significance that it warranted its own branding, reinforcing the idea that even in the medieval world, marketing played a role in the culinary landscape. Rhetorical questions. What drove medieval communities to dedicate such elaborate rituals to the quality of butter, a substance that today is often taken for granted? Was it merely the pursuit of profit, or did these traditions reflect deeper societal values and a longing for identity in an age of uncertainty? Conclusion. The rituals surrounding butter quality inspection in medieval guilds may seem trivial compared to the grand events of history, yet they reveal a rich tapestry of human interaction, local governance, and cultural identity. The minor figures and petty rules, case studies and comparisons, as well as the archaeological findings, paint a vivid picture of a time when something as mundane as butter could embody the complexities of social and economic life. In exploring these seemingly insignificant aspects of history, we find a deeper understanding of the past, one that celebrates the ordinary as much as it venerates the extraordinary. As we reflect on these traditions, we might consider how the legacy of such guilds continues to influence our modern perceptions of quality, craftsmanship, and community in the culinary world. In an age where mass production often overshadows artisanal practices, the dedication of these medieval guilds to the quality of butter serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of care, tradition, and authenticity in all that we consume. The mundane history of medieval guild butter quality inspection rituals. The butter produced in the medieval period was no mere culinary delight, it was a symbol of status, a staple of the diet, and a point of contention among guilds. The meticulous rituals surrounding butter quality inspection reveal not only the culinary practices of medieval society but also the intricate web of social dynamics, economic power, and petty regulations that governed daily life. ### Minor figures and petty rules. In the bustling towns of medieval Europe, butter production was overseen by a plethora of minor figures, each wielding a surprising amount of authority. Among these were the esteemed butter masters, individuals who had ascended to their status through a combination of skill, familial connections, and often, a hefty bribe. The butter masters were tasked with ensuring that the quality of butter met guild standards, which were often dictated by the whims of local nobility or the guild leaders themselves. Take, for instance, the case of old John Butterman of Norwich in 1352, a minor figure who rose to prominence due to his unmatched ability to detect the slightest hint of rancidity. It was said that he could discern the quality of butter simply by waving his hand over it. John's so-called butter-scented hands became legendary, and he was known to carry a small vial of salt water to cleanse his palms between inspections, a petty rule he enforced to maintain his reputation. Local guild records detail how he would often declare a batch of butter unfit for sale if the producer had failed to provide him with a proper bribe or a platter of the finest bread. In the case of the Guild of Butter and Cheese Makers in York, established in 1475, the guild had instituted a series of absurdly specific regulations. For example, butter could only be sold if it met the color standard of sunshine yellow, a hue that was often achieved through the addition of saffron or other dyes. Any butter that appeared too pale was immediately deemed inferior, and the producer faced a penalty of a fine or, in extreme cases, public humiliation in the town square, an effective, if not medievally cruel, deterrent against subpar butter production. ### Case studies with dates and lists. The guild records are replete with case studies that illustrate the absurdity of these inspections. In 1384, the Guild of Butter Makers in London documented a notorious incident involving a batch of butter produced by a woman named Agnes the Buttermonger. Her butter was deemed too soft and lacking in firmness, leading to a series of inspections that turned into a veritable circus. The inspection committee, led by the ever-particular Master Harold, the sharp Wainwright, scrutinized every inch of Agnes's butter with a set of peculiar criteria. 1. Color inspection. The butter needed to pass the sun's gaze test, where it was held up to the light to determine if it shone with the appropriate hue. 2. Texture test. Inspectors would press their thumb into the butter to assess its firmness. A butter failing this test was labeled flabby, and was immediately discarded. 3. Smell examination. The infamous sniff test was conducted, where inspectors took exaggeratedly deep breaths as they leaned over the butter, often leading to theatrical coughing fits if the butter failed to meet olfactory standards. Agnes's butter was ultimately deemed acceptable, but not before she had to endure a month of rumor-mongering and gossip, as the case became fodder for local tavern chatter. Was it the quality of her butter that led to such scrutiny, or was it the envy of her competitors that prompted the inspection? Another notable case occurred in Bruges in 1410, where a guild member named Bertel the buttermaker found himself in hot water after his butter was accused of smelling of the sea. Following a rigorous inspection that involved a panel of 6 guild members, the butter was declared to be of questionable origin, leading to a public trial. The case garnered attention not only for the butter itself but for the absurdity of the accusations. Bertel alleged that the butter had been tainted by a passing ship's cargo, while his accusers claimed he had been using seawater to enhance flavor. The trial ended with Bertel being acquitted but forced to attend a week of guild-sponsored seminars on proper butter production practices. ### Comparisons to other regions. While butter inspections in England were marked by eccentric rituals and petty regulations, the practices in other regions of Europe were often equally bizarre, yet strikingly different in their approach. For instance, in France, particularly in Normandy, the butter quality inspection was less a matter of private guild scrutiny and more a public affair. Here, butter was not merely judged by texture or aroma but was often subjected to taste tests conducted by local noblewomen who were considered the ultimate arbiters of quality. In 1422, the noblewoman known as Lady Isabelle de la Crème hosted a grand tasting event where local producers vied for her favor. The competition culminated in what was called the butter bowl, where the finest butters were presented on intricately carved wooden platters. The event attracted not just local producers but also merchants from across the region, and the winner would often find their butter's price doubled in the marketplace as a direct result of Lady Isabel's endorsement. Across the Alps in Switzerland, butter quality was judged through a system of public humiliation. If a batch was found lacking, the producer was required to march through town with a sign around their neck reading, "I am a maker of inferior butter," while the townsfolk pelted them with stale bread. This practice served as both a warning and a source of entertainment for the townspeople, reinforcing the communal value placed on butter quality. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological evidence has shed light on the significance of butter in medieval life and the rituals that surrounded its production. Excavations at various medieval farmsteads in England have uncovered specialized tools used in butter making, including wooden butter churns and molds that shaped the final product into decorative forms. One particularly fascinating find at a site in Yorkshire dates back to the early 15th century and features a butter mold shaped like a lion. Such molds not only served a practical purpose but also indicated a desire to impress customers with aesthetically pleasing butter, a precursor to modern branding. Additionally, remnants of written records unearthed in the ruins of a medieval monastery reveal the existence of a butter book, where monks meticulously documented the quality of butter procured from local producers. These records detailed not only the quality but also the sources of the butter, allowing for a fascinating glimpse into the regional variations and the specific guilds involved. Interestingly, the presence of salt in the butter was a point of contention. Archaeological analysis of butter remnants has revealed a higher salt content in certain regions, leading historians to speculate on the influence of local geography and trade routes on butter quality. For example, butters produced near coastal areas often contained more salt, which was used as a preservative, whereas those from inland regions tended to be fresher and creamier due to the absence of salt. Rhetorical questions to hook curiosity. What lengths would a medieval guild go to ensure the quality of butter, and how did these seemingly trivial rituals reflect the broader societal norms of the time? And how does the obsession with butter quality in the medieval period compare to modern-day standards in the culinary world? In conclusion, The rituals surrounding medieval guild butter quality inspections reveal an intricate tapestry of social dynamics, economic power struggles, and culinary traditions. These seemingly mundane details provide valuable insights into the lives of those who lived during the medieval period, offering a glimpse into their values, their aspirations, and their peculiarities. The legacy of these practices remains, echoing through the ages as a reminder of how even the most ordinary aspects of life can be imbued with extraordinary significance. And that's a wrap. We dove deep into the world of topic, proving that sometimes the most unexpected twists are hiding right under our noses, like a cat in a laundry basket. Did you know that? Surprising closing fact. It just goes to show that there's always more than meets the eye. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe for more mind-bending content, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And if you're hungry for more, be sure to check out our related episodes. There's a treasure trove waiting for you. Lastly, for those cozy nights, turn on loop so this episode plays again and again until you drift off to dreamland. Sweet dreams.